Our philosophy was always, we don't want to create a second version or a second software tool that's essentially a redundant application. So we've made the software generate the charts from those scheduling tools a very quick and easy exercise. It's a very powerful communication tool. It's a very powerful analysis tool. You want to be able to understand, as the schedule is changing, how does that reflect on my chart? But we know there's a few different ways of producing these charts. There's obviously the manual method, graphical tools. Typically, we've seen people use Excel and Excel-based kind of applications to produce these charts. The problem with them is, while they look attractive, they're very difficult to update and keep relevant. And it's prone to errors as well. There is the specialized type of software, which we've mentioned one of already, tend to be expensive, tend to be very difficult to learn. And as the amount of learning involved in it means, you can easily take a long time to learn. And then if you haven't used it for some time, you may actually even, need to relearn all of that again. So we've taken a hybrid approach where we've said, your existing scheduling tool where the calculation's done, that is your primary source of the data. And all we're doing is presenting that data in a slightly different way. What is TurboChart? It's designed to work side by side with your scheduling applications. We can actually connect into your schedule data depending on how your scheduling system is set up. Otherwise, if we can't connect, there is a copy and paste method, which is fairly straightforward as well. And the idea being, let's turn these charts into more than just a pretty picture. We want them to be an actual usable tool for helping to plan and schedule your projects. So some of the features that our product has, we obviously can generate a print layout in a PDF format of whatever size. I've seen customers produce them on quite large scale plots that they've hung up on walls in their offices. We also have the ability to generate what we call a HTML viewer. So it's actually like an embedded HTML file that has the chart for distribution to anyone that can use an internet browser. We obviously can add images to the charts. We have various options around the way, what we call the location grid or the linear scale. We have obviously a time grid, and we can present charts in days, weeks, or month, depending on the length of the project or the chart that you want to communicate. We have obviously the ability to create legends, and that's a key element of the way our software works. Is we have this concept that we call a shape code, which I will talk about in a moment. Obviously, the scheduled activities are presented on the charts. We can highlight criticality and critical paths as your CPM schedule has, determined criticality. Custom grid lines, which is fairly a standard application. One feature that we do have, which is we have the ability to overlay multiple versions of schedules. So if you're doing a comparison, it could be baseline versus current, or it could be different scenarios, or even just, last month versus previous month. We have the ability to bring in different versions of schedule data and present them almost like a baselining, a baseline bar kind of feature in other tools. We can add text and graphics onto the charts. We also have the ability to generate multiple charts from the data that you bring in. So as an example, you might want to have one chart that demonstrates, for instance, all the civil works, and another chart that demonstrates just the signaling and the mechanical, electrical work. We can have multiple charts, but they all collect the data from the same source. So you're not having to, manage multiple files or manage multiple data sets. If you actually dive into using the software, it can actually help you a little bit to understand how it's structured. But essentially what it's saying is there is some data that we bring in that's common for all charts, and then there is some data which is specific for individual charts, all within one file. At that point, I should probably mention TurboChart is a desktop tool. It's not a cloud or web-based software tool, so it does install onto individual users' desktops. And the reason for that is historically, most users of the scheduling software are still using desktop tools, but we can actually connect to, for instance, Primavera cloud-based databases, or Even our latest connection was to what is called OPC, Oracle Primavera Cloud, the latest version of Primavera as well. So one of the most common questions we get asked is, what do I need to do to my schedule data to prepare it for presenting in TurboChart? Not a lot is the answer. You prepare the schedule, or you use a schedule as you normally would: relationships, activities, activity coding, WBS, all that normal stuff that planners and schedulers do. What we do need is essentially some extra information of how you want your schedule activities displayed on the charts. So the first piece of information is what we call it a shape code. It's a text field. It literally just is everything that's coded with a shape code will appear on the chart in a certain way. So you might say, right, everything that's piling gets drawn as a brown box. Everything that's called apples will be a green line. Everything that's called, melon will be a brown hatched triangle. It's essentially a way of representing activities onto the charts. The other good thing about it is the shape code is also one of our filtering options. So let's say your schedule is 1,000 lines, only 200 activities are relevant for the chart, then only those 200 activities need this extra information. You don't need to necessarily populate everything in the schedule with this extra data. We don't have any predefined libraries as such. So we don't say, signaling will always be this shape or this color. It's completely user driven. That shape library, and when I do the demonstration, you'll see it. That shape library can actually be saved as a separate file that you can then reuse or distribute or share amongst other users. If you're talking a virtual desktop, as long as it's running a Windows operating system, then that should be fine. Our software is written for Windows. So if you're running, like, even if it's on an Amazon server, but it's running like a Windows Enterprise operating system or Citrix, some sort of virtualization like that, then our software will work. We have other users around the world that are using Citrix virtual desktops, Windows Enterprise servers, so that shouldn't be a problem. What can we connect to? Now, this is out of date, this slide, because we can connect to various different Oracle Primavera systems, including, as I mentioned, OPC. We can connect to Microsoft Project, Safran software, Safran Risk, Safran Project, Asta if you're using it, and obviously Excel. But from any of these information sources, we can also do what we call copy and paste. So even if you just have an Excel list of activities, we can still bring that into TurboChart if you need to. The benefit of being able to connect to your schedule data is that we can do what we call synchronize. So it literally means when you press F9 in Primavera to recalculate the network, if you're connected to that schedule in TurboChart, all you have to do is resync, and it will redraw the chart based on the latest dates. So it avoids having to, export an XML or an XCR file and then re-import, remap, reconnect everything. You can actually just seamlessly just refresh the data. Just some examples. High-rise project, probably not relevant for your railway project. This is a 40 kilometers of a highway project that I actually worked on here in Australia. This is a wind farm, so an example that says, it can even be used for projects that aren't typically what we call linear projects. This was an example of a metro, so sort of like a railway project, I guess, but where we had 3 underground stations and sections of tunnel connecting each of those station boxes. This was an elevated viaduct. This was a very detailed schedule. This is close to 4,500 schedule activities drawn on one chart, but that's what they wanted to see. It's each in the position of each and every single pier along, several kilometers of viaduct. Looking at that chart, I would be very concerned. And this was an example of a railway project from a user in Europe as well. So this is an example of how they connected Microsoft Project in this case and pull their schedule data in and represent it in TurboChart. So again, the software can be as simple or as powerful as you want it to be, and obviously there is a little bit of creativity required. But the one of the benefits of TurboChart is that it's very easy to change the presentation to play around with that aspect of it. I mentioned the ability to compare data sets. This is one of the standout features, I think, of TurboChart, is the ability to compare and see how is the schedule different from a previous version. Just this list probably needs to be updated, but who is using our software around the world? It's primarily being used by construction contractors and consultants being engaged by those contractors. We are slowly seeing a few client type of organizations that are they're the recipients of the contractors' information, so they're also starting to use TurboChart as well.